Hey guys, today we're in the book of First Chronicles chapter 4. Now chapters 4 through 9 are just the detailing of each of the tribes of Israel. So I won't have much to say over these chapters, but 4 through 9 is going to go through the 12 tribes of Israel and give descendants. Now, like we were talking about in previous videos, that Chronicles is all about giving hope. Who is going to be this messianic king, this new David that is to come after the exile? And so because of that, we see in chapter 4, the first tribe is mentioned is Judah, because that is the lineage that the messianic king, the new David, will come out of. So notice it starts with Judah, the first, as the first tribe, though it was the smallest. And then also, I just want to say a quick note here in verse 9. In verse 9, we see a name this is the only place we find it in all of Scripture where it says Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. If you remember back many, many years ago, there was a huge push in churches and pastors and Lifeway and all kinds of writings about the prayer of Jabez. This is where that comes from. Now, I don't have time to get into it, whether it's a good thing or it's not a good thing. I have a lot to say about it, but I'm not going to say it here. But here, this is where it comes from. So just from a couple verses, writers made hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah, I'm not a fan, right? So you can probably kind of read between the lines, but this is where it's from. And just know that in the tribe of Judah, we see this guy named Jabez, and he was more honorable than his brothers. We don't know about his brothers. We don't know about him. It just happens to mention that he was more honorable. And it gives one instance of why he was more honorable. And that was because he said one prayer. And this one prayer was answered by God. Now, we don't know the story. We don't understand the sovereignty of God in the situation. It's that one man said a prayer. God found that it was good, honorable, and he answered that prayer. And that's where the whole rigmarole came of Jabez's prayer. So there's that. I hope you didn't buy the book. Starting in verse 24, we see the second tribe, which is the tribe of Simeon. Okay, the tribe of Simeon. Notice in verse 27, it says, let's see, but his brothers did not have many children, nor did their clan multiply like the men of Judah. If you remember back when we read the book of Numbers started with a census, and the book of Numbers ended with a census. That's why it's called Numbers. It's literally numbering of Israel. And so what happens is they take a census before the 40 years of wandering, and then they take one after. Well, if you go back and compare those, you will see that the tribe of Simeon, though it started out as the largest tribe, it ended one of the smallest tribes. Why is that? Well, several reasons. The biggest one is that this was not an ultimately blessed tribe. Now, why do I say that? Notice, go down to verse 33. It says, along with these villages that were around these cities, but as far as Baal, these were the settlements, and they kept a genealogical record. Why is it talking about settlements or cities, depending on your translation? Well, thank goodness we're reading through the Old Testament. If you go back to the book of Genesis, and in Genesis chapter 34, you will remember that the sons of Jacob, there was Simeon, which is this tribe, and Levi, okay? Two sons. Well, they wanted to get retribution on the men who disgraced their sister, right? So they go back and they kill all the men of Shechem, okay? So Genesis 34. Because they went and did that, the Lord did not bless them. And we find out later on when Jacob is dying in Egypt with Joseph and brings all of his brothers there, we notice that Simeon and Levi, they don't get allotments in the promised land. They don't have a land area to live. We will find out later that God will allow certain cities and providences that the Levites can stay, but they will have no inheritance as the promised land. There's no section that is allotted to them. And a part of that was because of the sin that they did of killing all the men of Shechem. And so that's why here in verse 33, it says these were their settlements. They didn't have an area. They didn't have an allotment of land in the promised land. They only had certain cities and places that they could stay and their livestock could stay. And we can go back to the holy cities and kind of go through and pick out a lot. Just remember, there are certain cities in the north, in the central, and in the south, both on the east side of the Jordan and on the west side of the Jordan. They had these cities that they were allowed to stay in. And so that's why it is talking about these. So chapter 4 starts with Judah, which is where the Messianic king, the new David, will come out of. And then we start with Simeon, who will become, Simeon and Levi will become parts into the Levites of Israel. And so that's kind of it. There's a lot of names, and you can kind of dig into this what you will, but just know 4 through 9 are just the descendants of the tribe of Israel. Hope that makes sense. We'll see you tomorrow, chapter 5. God bless.